Chapter 4. What John Rance Had to Tell. It was 1 o'clock when we left number 3 Lauriston Gardens. Sherlock Holmes led me to the nearest telegraph office, whence he dispatched a long telegram. He then hailed a cab and ordered the driver to take us to the address given us by Lestrade. "There is nothing like first-hand evidence," he remarked. "As a matter of fact, my mind is entirely made up upon the case, but still we may as well learn all that is to be learned." "You amaze me, Holmes," said I. "Surely you are not as sure as you pretend to be of all those particulars which you gave?" "There's no room for a mistake," he answered. "The very first thing which I observed on arriving there was that a cab had made 2 ruts with its wheels close to the curb. Now, up to last night, we have had no rain for a week, so that those wheels which left such a deep impression must have been there during the night. There were the marks of the horse's hoofs too, the outline of one of which was far more clearly cut than that of the other 3, showing that that was a new shoe. Since the cab was there after the rain began, and was not there at any time during the morning, I have Gregson's word for that, it follows that it must have been there during the night, and therefore that it brought those 2 individuals to the house." "That seems simple enough," said I, "but how about the other man's height?" "Why, the height of a man, in 9 cases out of 10, can be told from the length of his stride. It is a simple calculation enough, though there is no use my boring you with figures. I had this fellow's stride both on the clay outside and on the dust within. Then I had a way of checking my calculation. When a man writes on a wall, his instinct leads him to write about the level of his own eyes. Now that writing was just over 6 feet from the ground. It was child's play." "And his age?" I asked. "Well, if a man can stride 4.5 feet without the smallest effort, he can't be quite in the Syrian yellow. That was the breadth of the puddle on the garden walk which he had evidently walked across. Patent leather boots had gone round, and square toes had hopped over. There is no mystery about it at all. I am simply applying to ordinary life a few of those precepts of observation and deduction which I advocated in that article. Is there anything else that puzzles you?" "The fingernails and the cigar," I suggested. "The writing on the wall was done with a man's forefinger dipped in blood. My glass allowed me to observe that the plaster was slightly scratched in doing it, which would not have been the case if the man's nail had been trimmed. I gathered out some scattered ash from the floor. It was dark in colour and flaky, such an ash as is only made by a Trichinopoly cigar. I have made a special study of cigar ashes, in fact. I have written a monograph upon the subject. I flatter myself that I can distinguish at a glance the ash of any known brand, either of cigar or of tobacco. It is just in such details that the skilled detective differs from the Gregson and Lestrade type." "And the florid face?" I asked. "Ah, that was a more daring shot, though I have no doubt that I was right. You must not ask me that at the present state of the affair." I passed my hand over my brow. "My head is in a whirl," I remarked. "The more one thinks of it, the more mysterious it grows. How came these 2 men, if there were 2 men, into an empty house? What has become of the cabman who drove them? How could one compel another to take poison? Where did the blood come from? What was the object of the murderer, since robbery had no part in it? How came the woman's ring there? Above all, why should the second man write up the German word Reich before decamping? I confess that I cannot see any possible way of reconciling all these facts." My companion smiled approvingly. "You sum up the difficulties of the situation succinctly and well," he said. "There is much that is still obscure, though I have quite made up my mind on the main facts. As to poor Lestrade's discovery, it was simply a blind intended to put the police upon a wrong track by suggesting socialism and secret societies. It was not done by a German. The A, if you noticed, was printed somewhat after the German fashion. Now, a real German invariably prints in the Latin character, so that we may safely say that this was not written by one, but by a clumsy imitator who overdid his part. It was simply a ruse to divert inquiry into a wrong channel. I'm not going to tell you much more of the case, Doctor. You know a conjurer gets no credit when once he has explained his trick, and if I show you too much of my method of working, you will come to the conclusion that I am a very ordinary individual after all." "I shall never do that," I answered. "You have brought detection as near an exact science as it ever will be brought in this world." My companion flushed up with pleasure at my words and the earnest way in which I uttered them. I had already observed that he was as sensitive to flattery on the score of his art as any girl could be of her beauty. "I'll tell you one other thing," he said. "Patent Leathers and Square Toes came in the same cab, and they walked down the pathway together as friendly as possible, arm in all probability. When they got inside, they walked up and down the room, or rather, Patent Leathers stood still, while Square Toes walked up and down. I could read all that in the dust, and I could read that as he walked, he grew more and more excited. That is shown by the increased length of his strides. He was talking all the while and working himself up, no doubt, into a fury. Then the tragedy occurred. I've told you all I know myself for now. The rest is mere surmise and conjecture. We have a good working basis, however, on which to start. We must hurry up, for I want to go to Halley's concert to hear Norman Neruda this afternoon." This conversation had occurred while our cab had been threading its way through a long succession of dingy streets and dreary byways. In the dingiest and dreariest of them, our driver suddenly came to a stand. "That's Audley Court in there," he said, pointing to a narrow slit in the line of dead-coloured brick. "You'll find me here when you come back."